You weren't just underestimated, you were miscalculated, and now their regret screams louder than their hate ever did. They laughed when you were quiet, mocked when you were patient, slept on you because you moved in silence. But what they didn't realize is that silence is not weakness. It's the storm gathering strength. And now that storm has hit, and it's wearing your face. You didn't just win, you shattered the rules they swore you had to follow. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting the current of the universe that moves with the chosen. And you don't fight the tide and expect to stay dry. Now they sit there soaked in their own bitterness, trying to patch up the cracks you left in their false confidence. This message isn't for everyone. It's not meant to be. It's for the chosen, the ones who felt the weight, the silence, the pressure, and still didn't break. If you feel this in your soul, then this is your signal. Like and subscribe to help this message reach more of the chosen ones. When you engage, the algorithm sends out a flare, a beacon. It tells YouTube, wake up, another chosen has risen. You're not alone, and neither are the others still finding their light. Let's bring them in. Now, let's talk about what it really means to be chosen. Being chosen isn't some fairy tale. It's not shiny. It's not soft. It's a war you never asked for, with enemies you never provoked. It's being pushed out, talked down, misread, misunderstood, until the day they can't ignore you anymore. And when that day comes, they call it luck. They say you changed. They act like they never tried to dim your light. But deep down, they know. They felt it. That quiet pressure around you wasn't just presence, it was purpose. The kind that haunts them. The kind that keeps them up at night wondering how you got through what was meant to break you. They see it in your eyes, that unshaken fire, that calm defiance. You were never just another person in the crowd. You were marked by the weight of something too big to name, but too powerful to stop. That's what being chosen is. And it doesn't come with applause. It comes with tests, with silence, with rooms that go cold when you walk in. But still, you walk in, and don't think we forgot. You doubted yourself, didn't you? You questioned your own light. You thought maybe they were right. Maybe you were crazy for believing you had something different in you. Let this be your correction. You were never alone. You were just ahead. And the universe? It didn't leave you. It was just making sure the stage was set for when you finally stepped into what's yours. They hate you not because you're wrong, but because you proved them wrong without even trying. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to clap back. Your success became the response. You became the mirror, and they can't stand what it reflects. They'll say you changed, say you got lucky, say anything but the truth. You were chosen, and no amount of noise, slander, or shade could change that. Remember this dash. When you carry the light, you don't need to chase the dark. The dark finds you, and it runs. Welcome to the other side. You made it. Now stand tall, because they can't unsee what you've become. So here you are, standing in the aftershock of the impossible. You did what they said couldn't be done, and now they're scrambling to explain it away, choking on their own disbelief. If you're still watching, that's no accident. The pull you're feeling, that's not curiosity, that's confirmation. Drop a 111 in the comments if you know the universe didn't bring you here by mistake. This message is yours. This moment is yours. Stay with me, because what's coming next will shake you awake in ways comfort never could. And now, let's get into it, step by step. Number 1. They poked the quiet one, and now the storm won't stop. They didn't just underestimate you, they disrespected the universe's choice. Now they're learning the hard way. You can't spit at the sky and not expect rain. They thought they were clever, slick even, whispering behind your back, laughing in group chats, betting on your silence like it meant surrender. They saw your patience as weakness, your solitude as failure, your quiet grind as emptiness. But what they didn't realize was this: you were chosen, and the universe was busy setting the stage, not writing your obituary. You weren't supposed to make it. According to who? Them? The same ones who couldn't stomach their own reflection, so they projected their fear onto you. The same ones who built their confidence on tearing others down, only to find that their whole foundation cracks when someone like you walks into the room. Yes, you did the unthinkable. You broke out of the invisible box they built for you. You broke their illusion. You weren't loud. You weren't begging for validation. You weren't in their little circles. Yet here you are, winning. And not just winning. Thriving in a way that makes them question the rules they thought they understood. And now they're angry. But it's not the kind of anger that explodes. No, it simmers. It simmers because they have to act like they're not watching, pretend they're not bothered, fake smiles through clenched teeth. They're mad, silent car rides, passive-aggressive posts, eyes that can't meet yours anymore. They see your glow and try to dim it with sarcasm, but it's too late. They're watching you shine from a place they can't reach, and that burns more than failure ever could. But let's pause for a second, because this is where you come in, chosen one. This is where you have to take a hard look in the mirror and ask yourself, why did you ever doubt this was coming? Why did you ever believe them over the pull you felt deep down? That pull that told you were never regular. That whisper you tried to ignore, the one that said, there's something different about you. That wasn't ego. That was truth. And yet, you almost believed them. You almost dimmed your own light to make their comfort zones feel safer. You almost gave them the satisfaction of seeing you shrink. But you didn't. Even when you doubted. Even when you broke down. Even when you questioned if you were just fooling yourself. You kept going. That's what makes you chosen. The universe doesn't choose the loudest. It chooses the ones who endure the quietest storms and still refuse to fold. Let this be the wake-up call you didn't know you needed, because from this point forward, it's not about proving anything to them. You already did that. Their confusion is proof. Their anger is proof. Their sudden silence is proof. You were never just fighting people. You were fighting a system that was set up to ignore you. You were playing chess while they were playing favorites. You were building in the dark while they were clout chasing under spotlights that burn out quick. And now that the light is on you, not because you begged for it, but because it was earned, they're scrambling. You messed with their blueprint. You shook up the math. They can't calculate your rise because it wasn't based on their formulas. That's what scares them. That's what hurts. You are walking proof that the rules they follow aren't real. And when people see that, their whole identity gets questioned. You didn't just win. You became a glitch in their matrix. You ever wonder why it feels so lonely at times? Why the path you walk feels invisible to everyone else? It's because it wasn't built for the crowd. It was carved for you. You didn't get handed the spotlight. You earned the scars, the silence, the setbacks, and still rose. Chosen ones are not lucky. They are aligned. When the universe chooses you, it doesn't hand you gifts. It hands you weight. And when you carry that weight long enough, the universe starts to move things for you. Quietly at first, then suddenly, the right people show up, the wrong ones fall off, opportunities find you, the road bends in your favor. Not because you're special in some fantasy sense, but because you answered the call. And that's what they'll never understand. They thought they were just playing games with a person. What they didn't know is they were fighting against timing, against energy, against the universal system that doesn't miss. And now, that system is correcting their mistake. You. So go ahead. Let them stew. Let them analyze your every move in silence. Let them whisper your name with confusion. Let them pretend they're unbothered while secretly obsessing. Let them cry, because no matter how loud their doubts once were, your success has become a frequency they can't escape. You're not their competition, you're their karma. Let that sit. And when doubt creeps in again, because it will, remember this: you didn't get here by accident. You didn't luck out. You were chosen. You were refined in isolation, sharpened in silence, and launched in divine timing. That's why you scare them. That's why they're mad. That's why they're crying. They poked the quiet one, and now the storm won't stop. Number 2. You picked the lock to a cage they swore was permanent. They didn't just want you stuck, they wanted you small, because your freedom would force them to face their own chains. They never thought you'd make it out, not just out of your situation, but out of the mind they tried to trap you in. See, it wasn't just about your surroundings, it was about your thoughts. They built walls you couldn't see, locked doors you didn't know were there, and called it advice. They gave you a ceiling and dared you to reach for it, knowing full well they never planned on letting you break through. They handed you doubt dressed as logic, fear disguised as wisdom, and you believed it for a while. They said things like, "People like us don't live like that. Be realistic. Stay in your lane. Don't dream too big. It'll only hurt more when it doesn't happen." And it wasn't always loud. It wasn't always cruel. Sometimes it came from people who smiled when they said it. People who loved you or claimed they did. People who sounded concerned, not controlling. But don't get it twisted. Concern can be a mask for control. And their comfort with your limitations was never love. It was fear. Fear that if you ever really saw your power, they'd have to admit they'd given up on theirs. So they built you a cage, not with bars, but with beliefs. Invisible, quiet, subtle, and almost permanent. Almost. But then something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It started with a question, a whisper, a flicker of rebellion that said, "What if they're wrong?" And once that seed took root, the whole structure started to shake. You saw the cracks in their logic. You saw how their rules were just fears passed down like hand-me-downs. You realized that realistic was just code for don't try. And the cage, it didn't explode. It dissolved. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every new risk you took, every limiting belief you questioned, every time you moved in spite of fear, the lock loosened. Until one day, you looked around and realized you were already out. And that's what scares them the most. You didn't just change your life, you changed your mind. You rewired your thinking. You rewrote the code they installed, and now they don't know how to talk to you. Their old tricks don't work. Their guilt trips don't hit. Their fake concern doesn't land. You've outgrown the language of limitation. They see it in your eyes, that new sharpness, that clarity. You don't flinch the way you used to. You don't ask for permission. You don't walk on eggshells around their comfort zones. And that, to them, is dangerous. Because now you're not just free, you're proof. You're living, breathing evidence that the cage isn't real, that their whole life might be built on a lie they never dared to challenge. And here's the part they'll never admit. They knew you were capable. That's why they tried so hard to keep you boxed in. No one goes out of their way to cage what they don't fear. Your light scared them before it even got bright. But you kept going, even when it was foggy, even when you were doubting yourself, even when part of you still wanted to believe the lies, just so life would be easier to explain. You kept pushing, kept asking, kept breaking down every thought that started with, "I can't." That's the real escape. That's the real power. The cage was never locked. It was just comfortable, and you had to get uncomfortable to get free. So now what? Now you walk with different energy. Now you dream with both eyes open. Now you move like someone who remembers what it was like to be mentally shackled and never wants to go back. You understand that the hardest prison to escape is the one you don't know you're in. And now that you're out, they're not angry because you escaped. They're angry because you figured out it was never real in the first place. They wanted you to believe the door was locked. They wanted you to sit quietly in a room with an open exit, too scared to test it. But you stood up. You turned the knob. You walked through. And when they asked how, you didn't say a word. Because real freedom doesn't need permission, just recognition. Let them stare. Let them talk. Let them wonder what changed. You know what changed. You stopped believing in limits that were never yours to begin with. Number 3, you didn't just win. You flipped the whole board. They wrote the rules to trap you. You rewrote the whole game just by refusing to play. You changed the game, full stop. Not because someone handed you a playbook, not because the odds were in your favor, but because one day something in you snapped. You got tired. Not tired in the physical sense, spirit tired, soul weary, tired of shrinking, tired of waiting, tired of pretending to be okay with a life that felt like slow death. And that moment right there, that was the start of everything. It might have been quiet, it might have been messy, but something in you woke up. And once it did, there was no going back. You stopped waiting for someone to clap for you. You stopped needing someone to tell you what was possible. You saw through the illusion that the rules were made up, the limits were fake, and the people guarding them were just scared to admit it. And in that moment of truth, you did the unthinkable. You stepped outside the game entirely. You stopped playing by their script. You stopped chasing approval in systems designed to overlook you. You stopped trying to win at a game built for you to lose. Instead, you picked up your own pen and wrote a new chapter, one where you weren't just a player, you were the blueprint. And now, just by existing, just by being, you're shaking the foundation they built their comfort on. You're proof that it was never about luck, never about timing. It was always about belief, effort, obsession, guts. And they can't stand that. Because deep down, they know they could have done what you did. They could have gone harder, trusted more, risked everything. But they didn't. They stalled. They made excuses. They waited for the green light that never came, while you ran through the red. Now your success is a mirror, and it cuts deep. Not because you flaunt it, not because you rubbed it in, but because when they see you, they're forced to face what they didn't do. And that kind of reflection, it burns, it breaks the illusion, it makes their comfort feel like a trap. And nobody likes realizing they built their own cage. You didn't just raise the bar, you removed it. You shattered the idea that there's a certain type of person who wins. That success is for those people over there. That only the loud, the connected, the born-into-it folks get to have more. You proved that alignment beats background, that drive beats design, that when the universe chooses you and you choose back, the entire landscape shifts. And oh, they feel it. Even if they don't say it, even if they never give you your flowers, they feel it. In the tension of their voice when your name comes up, in the long pauses, in the backhanded compliments. They feel it every time you walk in a room they once owned, and the energy bends around you now. They'll never admit it, but you didn't just grow, you outgrew them. You broke the ceiling they settled under, and now your presence challenges their whole story. They have to either rise or resent you. And most of them, they chose resentment. That's fine, that's expected. But here's the catch. They can't unsee what you've done. They can't unlearn your rise. And that haunts them. Because they were comfortable when you were quiet. They were confident when you were unsure. But now that you've stepped into your power, their security system is glitching. The foundation is cracking. The excuses are rotting. And they're panicking. Not because you took something from them, but because you proved they could have had it too. You didn't wait for the door to open. You built your own. You didn't ask for space. You became the space. You didn't play the game. You made them realize the game was broken. And that kind of power, that kind of truth, it doesn't just change lives. It exposes the ones who refused to change. So keep going. Don't slow down for their comfort. Don't shrink for their insecurities. Don't apologize for being the blueprint. Let them be mad. Let them whisper. Let them watch. Because every move you make from this point forward is a message. I didn't just change my life. I changed what's possible. Number 4, you became the truth. And the truth made them uncomfortable. Your rise didn't hurt them. The mirror you became did. You stood up, and suddenly they couldn't sit in their lies anymore. Let's make one thing clear. Your success isn't what truly bothers them. It's what your success exposes. It's the raw, ugly truth it pulls out of the shadows. Because when you win without their rules, when you elevate without their blueprint, when you grow in a soil they swore was barren, it forces them to face a reality they've spent years avoiding. They say it's luck. They say timing. They say you had help. But let's be honest, those are just fancy ways to say, I could have done more, but I didn't. And that realization hits different when the person they once looked down on is now standing above the noise. They were never holding you back. They couldn't. The real gag? They were holding themselves back the whole time, projecting their fear onto you, handing you their limits like they were facts, telling you, it's not that easy, be careful, life doesn't work that way. But then you made it work. You bent the path. You shattered the myths. And now they have nowhere left to hide. Because you didn't just win, you rewrote the narrative. You didn't follow the script. You burned it. You didn't knock on the door. You built your own house, turned the lights on, and invited yourself in. And the ones still waiting for approval, they don't know how to process that. See you existing at this level? It makes their excuses look paper thin, their delays look deliberate, their doubt look like fear. You've become the thing they swore couldn't exist. And that's terrifying. Because now, every time they say, I can't, they remember you could and did. You are the proof they tried to bury. And the more you rise, the more their mask slips. The fake support starts to fade. The backhanded compliments get sharper. The energy in the room shifts when you speak, when you walk in, when your name gets mentioned. It's not paranoia, it's perception. Because whether they admit it or not, your life is convicting theirs. You ever notice how they suddenly go quiet when you share good news? How they try to change the subject? How their smile doesn't quite reach their eyes? That's not indifference. That's internal panic. Because your glow is a spotlight, and it's showing everything they've been trying to hide, especially from themselves. They told people stories about why you wouldn't make it. They laughed at your dreams, counted you out, maybe even felt sorry for you. Now they have to circle back, change the narrative, act like they always believed in you. But the truth doesn't forget, and neither do you. And no, you didn't do it to prove them wrong. You didn't wake up obsessed with revenge. You simply refused to live a life that made you feel like a ghost. You chose more, you became more, and your existence, in its full unapologetic power, is now the loudest truth in the room. It's uncomfortable, it's undeniable, it's unforgettable. When you become what they said was impossible, their lies start to sound like confessions. So let them shift, let them squirm, let them whisper. You don't owe them comfort. You don't need to play small to make them feel big again. You've already done the heavy lifting, breaking the mental chains, surviving the silence, walking through fire with nothing but belief in your bones. And now, you're the reminder, the standard, the ghost of potential they buried showing back up in living form. And that's why they're mad. You proved them wrong simply by being right about you the whole time. So keep walking, keep shining, don't explain, don't defend, don't dilute the message just because it's hard for them to hear. You've become living proof that the system they clung to was flawed. And if that truth burns, good. Truth should burn when it's been buried too long. And you were the match they never saw coming. Number 5, you didn't just win, you changed the whole sport. They practiced their whole lives for a game that no longer matters, and now they're mad the scoreboard doesn't recognize their points. Let's be real. Your success didn't just shock them, it shook them. Not because you made it, but because you made it without their formula. You didn't take their path. You didn't follow their map. You didn't ask for directions. You tore up the script, wrote your own rules, and now you're operating in a realm they don't even understand. That's not just winning, that's disrupting the ecosystem. That's making their entire belief system collapse in on itself. They're not mad that you succeeded. They're mad that you succeeded outside their control. They're mad because you've become undeniable without ever playing the part they thought you needed to play. You didn't wait your turn. You didn't earn your stripes by kissing up, following trends, or staying quiet. You created your own momentum, and now their whole system is glitching because it was never built to recognize someone like you. This is what happens when a chosen one stops waiting and starts building. You've made it painfully obvious that the game they were loyal to, the one with fake rules, imaginary hierarchies, and gatekeepers guarding nothing, was just a mental illusion passed down through fear and repetition. And now that you've blown through it, they're stuck, scrambling, confused. They trained for a race you're not even running anymore, and they're exhausted trying to catch someone who refused to run laps in their cage. They can't compete with what they can't understand. And let's get one thing straight. They never saw you as competition in the beginning. That's why they underestimated you. That's why they overlooked you. You weren't in their conversations, their circles, or their schemes. You were invisible until your presence made too much noise to ignore. Now they're trying to catch up, not realizing you already left the stadium. They thought your power was rooted in talent or timing. They still don't understand its alignment. When the universe backs you, when your purpose clicks into place, when you stop trying to fit in and start honoring your own lane, you become untouchable. Not because you're better, but because you stopped playing by their limits. That's the thing about chosen ones. You don't just change your life, you change what life looks like for everyone around you. You expand the idea of what's possible. You open doors they never even knew existed. And instead of being inspired, most get scared. Because when you succeed outside the system, They're forced to admit they might have wasted years following rules that didn't exist. Now, they're stuck trying to update strategies for a game you already left behind. You didn't break the rules. You broke their belief in the rules. And that's what they can't compete with. It's not your money, or your influence, or your wins. It's your freedom, your mental freedom, your spiritual clarity, your refusal to be boxed in. They can hustle all they want, but they'll never match the power of someone walking fully in alignment, moving with purpose, led by something real. So while they're overanalyzing, second-guessing, mimicking, and failing to replicate what they never understood, you're evolving. Quietly, powerfully, authentically. You're playing a whole new game, one where there are no referees, no gatekeepers, and no boundaries but the ones you choose. And no, they can't copy this, because what you tapped into, it didn't come from a course, a mentor, or a motivational speech. It came from the fire, the sleepless nights, the doubts, the isolation, the unlearning, the rebuilding, that depth. They don't want to go there. They want your results without your sacrifice. And that's why they'll keep losing. They're still looking for a playbook. You became the prototype. Let them talk. Let them panic. Let them try to figure it out. You don't need to prove anything. Your existence is the proof. The fact that you're moving differently, thinking differently, creating differently, that's the scoreboard. That's the victory. They can't compete, not because you're playing harder, but because you're not playing their game at all. And when the chosen one changes the game, the old players either evolve or get left watching from the bleachers. Number 6. You turned into the mirror they can't look away from, even when it hurts. They can't celebrate you, because doing so would mean admitting they could have done it too, and didn't. Your glow didn't blind them, it exposed them. Not because you meant to, not because you rubbed it in their face, but because you existed. You became the proof that everything they told themselves to stay comfortable was a lie. Every excuse they held close like a shield shattered the moment you rose out of the same storm they used as a reason to quit. You didn't come from a silver spoon. You didn't have a shortcut. You didn't skip steps. You came from the same blocks, same homes, same jobs, same generational weight. And still, you made it. You rose. You decided not to let your starting point be your ending. And that decision, that's what makes you the mirror. A mirror they never asked for, but now can't escape, because when you level up without the usual cheat codes, it forces people to look at what they did with their time, their energy, their chances, and most people aren't ready for that kind of truth. So they try to dim you, label you, say you changed. Of course you did. You had to. You weren't going to stay in a mindset that was never yours to begin with. You were evolving, they were standing still. And that stillness? It starts to rot when someone near them starts to move. Let's be clear, this isn't about jealousy. It's deeper than that. It's conviction. Because while they were making excuses, you were making adjustments. While they were numbing their dreams, you were building yours brick by brick in silence. They had the same hours in the day, the same access to effort, the same sky. But they told themselves the story that people like us don't get that far. And then you got that far, and now the story doesn't work anymore. So they rewrite it, not with facts, but with fiction. You got lucky. You had help. You changed. But the truth, they never even tried. And the worst kind of pain is knowing that the only thing that stood between them and the life they wanted was their own refusal to begin. That's why your presence makes them flinch. That's why they avoid eye contact when the topic of doing better comes up. That's why they go quiet when you speak. It's not about hate. It's about the reflection. You became a walking, breathing version of the life they convinced themselves wasn't possible. And that kind of truth hits harder than any insult ever could. They didn't want better to be possible for someone like you, because that means it was always possible for them too. But they didn't want possible. They wanted permission, and you didn't wait for it. You gave it to yourself. You let go of the noise. You tuned out the "you can't" and leaned into the whisper that said, "Watch me." You made sacrifices they'll never understand. You fought battles in your mind they were too afraid to confront. And now, when they see you free, healed, leveling up, it's not resentment they feel. It's the weight of what they refuse to face in themselves. You didn't change, you just stopped pretending. And now, they have to stop pretending too. They don't hate your growth, they hate what it reminds them of, the version of themselves they were supposed to become, the goals they pushed aside, the chances they let rot, the dreams they once had but buried under comfort and fear. And now those ghosts are rising every time your name gets brought up. You are the wake-up call they never wanted but desperately needed. And here's the thing. You're not done. You're still rising, still evolving, and every level you climb makes the mirror sharper, louder, harder to avoid. Some will run from it, some will crack under it, and a rare few, they'll finally face it. They'll finally admit, if they did it, maybe I can too. So don't dim, don't downplay, don't try to soften the edges of who you've become just to make them more comfortable in their delay. You earned this version of you. And if being your full, unapologetic self makes the room feel uncomfortable, that's not your problem. That's just the mirror doing its job. Because you didn't just reflect their truth, you became it. And now, they can't unsee what's possible. Number 7, you grew past the garden they tried to keep you in. They loved you when you were manageable, not when you became magnetic. Some people were cool with you growing, as long as it happened their way, as long as they could measure it, mold it, and monitor it. They clapped when you were the student, cheered when you were still asking for advice, nodded approvingly when you stayed within the lines they quietly drew around your potential. But the moment your growth became unpredictable, the moment it stopped needing their permission or direction, the energy changed. You grew wild, not reckless, wild, as in untamed, as in free, as in you no longer asked for sunlight, you reached for it yourself. And that scared the hell out of them. Because now they can't say they built you. They can't take credit for your rise. They can't act like they pulled you up from nothing. You elevated beyond their grasp, beyond their narrative, beyond their influence. And you did it without turning back for applause. That's why they say you changed. That's why they say you're too much now. But let's be honest. What they really mean is, you stopped playing the role they gave you. You were never meant to be domesticated. You were never supposed to stay small just to make someone else feel tall. You were always meant to grow in every direction, wildly, freely, fully. But when your growth stopped being convenient for them, it became a problem. They didn't expect you to become the blueprint, the standard, the example, the walking reminder of what happens when someone stops shrinking and starts blooming without apology. You outgrew their influence, outgrew their advice, outgrew the little box they tried to package your greatness in. You weren't supposed to need them anymore, and that's why they're mad. They wanted to own your glow, shape it, filter it, be the ones to say, I helped them get there. But now that you've arrived on your own terms, with your own fire, they have no seat at the table you built. And that burns more than any success ever could. See, they liked your potential, not your power. Potential is easy to manage. It's humble. It's quiet. It asks for help. Power moves. It disrupts. It speaks with certainty. It no longer asks for permission to be seen. And once you stepped into that power, you became something they could no longer influence. And that, to people used to being in control, is terrifying. But you didn't grow to be controlled. You grew to be complete. They called it rebellion, but it was just you becoming everything they never expected to witness, let alone try to contain. And no, you're not too much. You're just finally being everything you've always been, without editing yourself for their comfort. You're not overconfident. You're aware. You're not arrogant. You're aligned. You're not cold. You're clear. And clarity will always offend those who benefited from your confusion. They didn't lose you because you grew. They lost you because they tried to own your growth. And the wild doesn't answer to gardeners. You no longer fit their narrative, so now they tell a different story. One that paints you as distant, changed, difficult. But here's the truth they don't say out loud. You never changed. You just stopped asking how tall you were allowed to grow. You stopped watering dead conversations. You stopped seeking advice from people who secretly envied your hunger. You stopped entertaining small thinking dressed up as realism. You stopped letting people cap your capacity just because they couldn't imagine more. And now you bloom on your own time, in your own direction, on your own terms. Let them be uncomfortable, let them talk, let them whisper. They were never meant to be the authors of your story, just passing characters. And now their chapters are closed. You are no longer someone they can mold, no longer someone they can claim. You're not the project anymore. You're the presence, the proof, the path. And they can either evolve or get left rereading the part of your story where they thought you'd stay small. Because the truth is, you didn't become too much. You just stopped being less. Number 8, you are the receipt they can't rip up. You didn't just win, you removed every excuse they ever leaned on. You became the proof that it could have been done and that they simply didn't do it. There's a special kind of silence that follows your name now. It's not respect, not yet. It's discomfort, it's tension. It's the sound of people choking on their own justifications. Because your rise wasn't supposed to happen. Not with your background, not with your setbacks, not without the handouts they had. You weren't even supposed to be in the room. But now that you're in it, thriving, building, glowing, you've become the proof they can't ignore. You did more with less, period. They had the resources, the early access, the connections, the family name, the shortcuts. They had comfort, they had time, but they never had drive. Not like you. And that's why they're mad, because you built something real out of scraps. And in doing so, you exposed the truth they've been running from their whole lives. It was never about luck. It was never the system. It was never what was given. It was what was done with what was given. And now, they have to look in the mirror and admit they didn't do enough. That burns more than failure. Failure is easier to live with when you can blame it on external things. But your presence removes every excuse. You stripped the mask off their self-pity and replaced it with a hard truth. They didn't even try. See, people like them love to say, "It's different for you." But they don't want to talk about the nights you couldn't sleep because the pressure was too loud. They don't want to acknowledge the sacrifices you made, the loneliness, the rejections, the silent seasons where you had to be your own motivation. They can't admit that your hunger was forged in fire while theirs was dulled by comfort. Because you had no safety net, you had no one calling in favors for you, no roadmap, just raw grit, just a deep, soul-level refusal to settle. While they had comfort, you had clarity, and clarity will take you further than privilege ever will. Now, they watch from the sidelines, bitter, confused, uncomfortable, because you shattered their illusion. You were the one they pitied, the one they talked down to, the one they didn't even consider a contender. And now, you're living the life they only talked about, the life they said was impossible, unrealistic, for people with advantages. You proved that none of that was real. You showed what happens when someone stops waiting for approval and starts building with what little they've got. You turned scraps into systems, setbacks into strategies, pain into power. You are the walking, breathing contradiction to everything they told themselves so they could stay safe. And now their comfort looks like cowardice next to your courage. They say you changed, say you forgot where you came from, but what they really mean is, you didn't stay where they left you. You didn't freeze in place. You moved, you grew, you evolved. And now, instead of being someone they can help, guide, or feel superior to, you're someone they can't even look in the eyes. Because you remind them. You remind them of the dreams they shelved, the passion they buried, the steps they didn't take, and the terrifying truth that maybe it was always possible. They were just too scared to go get it. That's the power of your presence. You don't have to say a word. You walk into a room and shift the temperature. You speak, and their subconscious scrambles for an excuse. You smile, and it feels like a spotlight on everything they could have been. It's not your fault. It's just your existence. That's how loud living proof speaks. You didn't come from privilege. You came from pressure, and you made diamonds. So let them talk. Let them try to discredit you. Let them twist the narrative. None of it matters now. You've already done the one thing they prayed would never happen. You made it undeniable. You're not a theory. You're not a motivational quote. You're a receipt, a living transaction between pain and power, sacrifice and success. And no matter what they say, they can't throw that receipt away. It exists. You exist. And every time you rise, every time you thrive, every time you level up again, that receipt gets stamped all over again. You are the proof that they could have done more, but didn't. And that truth? It echoes louder than anything they'll ever say. Number 9, you are the storm they never saw coming. They were fine with your survival. They could stomach your struggle, even applaud small wins, as long as you stayed below them, as long as you didn't challenge their position, their pride, their comfort. But then you rose, not just surviving, but thriving, not just existing, but dominating. And suddenly, you weren't an underdog. You were a threat. You didn't need noise. You didn't need validation. You didn't flex. You moved, quiet, precise, relentless. And that's what made it hit harder. Because now, you're their silent nightmare. You are proof that comfort kills growth. Proof that surviving isn't enough. Proof that they settled and you didn't. You didn't scream. You became the scream. And now, they want to cry. And now, here we are, full circle. You didn't just rise, you redefined what rising looks like. You didn't ask for power, you became it. Let them talk, let them watch. You are the proof, the mirror, the nightmare, and the standard. If this message hit your soul, it wasn't by accident. Like, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments if you know you're one of the chosen. Share this with someone who needs to wake up to their power. The universe doesn't choose at random. It chooses the ready. And clearly, you're ready.